accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Additionally, as this meeting is being held remotely, what they call electronic means by Zoom, our notice, our yearly notice, has also included that information, including a way to join the meeting by the internet, as most of us are, or by telephone number, which seems to have a glitch this evening. And that has also been published in the newspaper, put on the borough website and the borough bulletin board, and provided to the clerk. For those of you who are joining us this evening, if you're on the website using the video link, when it comes time for public comment, there is a feature next to your name that it's a raise hand feature. If you do that, we'll be able to see it. We'll call on you. You can ask questions, make comments on applications. If you're on telephone, you hit *9 to raise your hand, and *6 will toggle on and off mute. Again, when the public session comes, we'll remind you of those features. Mr. Chairman, that takes care of the legalese.
All right, thank you. We'll go into the first application, which is going to be 2104 Craig Kutula, if I said that right. Are you there?
Yes, Kutula. Yes, we're here.
Could you just give us a brief summary of what you'd
Mr.
like
Chairman, I
to
just need to swear him in.
Oh, okay.
Craig, are you and your wife both going to testify, or both of you? I'm sorry, both of you, yeah.
Both of us.
We're both
yeah.
here, yes.
Okay, so both raise your hands. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
And each of you give us your name and spell your last name.
Sure.
Sherry Kutila, Kutyla.
Craig Kutula, Kutyla.
Okay, and your address is 11 Devonshire Road?
Correct.
Okay, so it's rather informal. Just really explain to the board what work you're doing at your house and why you had to come here this evening for an approval.
Sure.
And
we're
actually,
looking
while you're
to-
speaking, I'll put up a copy of your survey.
Okay.
Go right
Thank you.
ahead.
Yeah, all we're doing is looking to put above ground pool on the side yard of our property. We are on we are the last house on the dead end of Devonshire Road. The side yard where we intend to where we're applying for the variance to put the pool. There's no water lines need to be moved, no electrical lines. There's no house on that side. It's actually my neighbor, his backyard in Patriots Village. That's the
Plaza.
Patriots Plaza. To put the pool in the rear of our residence, we wouldn't have enough room. There's about 10 feet of grass from the house, maybe 15 feet. And then we have a hill that goes up on an incline and levels off with Main Street. So I guess to do that, the pool company was telling us that we'd have to dig into the hill, put a retaining wall in, much more money than what we expected to start with, opposed to putting the pool on the side yard. And that's about it.
And Mr. Chairman, the application needs one variance. Pools are supposed to be behind the rear building line. So if you can see my cursor, this is the back edge of the building. And if you carried the line across, the pool would need to be entirely in the backyard. And obviously it's not, it's in the side yard area. That's what creates the variance. And as the applicant indicated, due to the topography of the backyard, it's not ideal to put it back there.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board at this point? Jay, did you have some comments on this application?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there's a concern that we have looking at the survey. There is an existing 20-foot wide sanitary sewer easement that the pool is proposed to be located on top of. That sewer easement was for a force main from a pumping station that used to exist when that development was originally constructed. When the adjacent development was constructed, that pump station was abandoned. So the force main across this property is no longer in service, but there's still an existing easement on the property, to my knowledge, that's never been extinguished. And typically the borough doesn't allow a structure to be built over top of an easement. But in this case, I had some discussions with Mr. Kem, the attorney, and we feel that since the force main is not in service, we should be able to allow the pool to be constructed possibly with a caveat that for some reason, if the borough ever needs to go through and do work within that easement, that pool would have to be moved out of the easement area.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and everyone, to further illustrate it, if you can see my cursor, which is a little hand, there's this dotted line that runs up the side of the property. And this is the property line. This is that 20-foot area that Jay described. That is the easement area. And again, we're not sure exactly where, but somewhere in there, there is a pipe. The pipe is no longer in service. So we would ask the board to impose those two conditions, actually, and also kind of putting the applicant on notice is one, that if the application is granted, that if the pool ever needs to be moved, because the borough needs to access that easement area, that the applicant would move it at their cost. And two is, since we don't know the exact details of that abandoned in place pipeline, we're not sure if the pool is actually directly on top of it. And if it is, if it can handle the weight, the concern is the pipeline could collapse. Unlikely, but it's possible. And without having further details and actually doing some expensive investigation, we're not sure. So we would ask if it's the board imposes two conditions, that if the pool ever needs to be moved for access to the pipeline or the easement area, that would be done at the applicant's expense, and also that the applicant has been advised of the potential weight issue because of the sewer line, and they understand that that's a risk they're taking.
All right, thank you. Craig, Sherry, are you familiar with the issues we're talking about?
That if
Craig,
it does
Sherry,
need,
yes,
Can
can
you-
you unmute?
Yes.
yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we were totally unaware of the issue with the pipeline. But I mean, we would agree that if ever anything needs to be done, yes, we would move the pool. And I guess now we're aware of the
Thank you.
risk of the pipe.
I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Everybody. Just
Are
tell
there
them
any
that you're
other-
on.
This is Mr. Corrigan. I'm finally on.
Awesome.
Okay, good, John.
Okay, John.
Any other questions from the members of the board?
Hey, Tom.
Monica, battery's up there.
He just got on. Thanks so much for your help. Was it a problem on our end or their end? Okay.
Any questions at all? Or
Back in the meeting, but thanks so much. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
I make a motion, to open it to the public? Anybody from the public wish to speak about this application? Make a motion, we close it to the public? What's the board's pleasure on this application?
Make a motion, we approve it.
Second,
Who
Paul?
was that?
Phil?
Phil?
Yep.
And who else?
Mr. Zavilli.
Okay.
Roll call?
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski? Mr. Savili?
Yes.
Mr. Emma?
Yes.
Mr. Esposito?
Okay, at this time, it's been approved, and at our next meeting will be memorialized, and you'll be able to go out for your permits.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Monica, could you do me a favor and put on channel 37?
Just 37.
Okay, the next application is from Rodriguez, 2107. Are they there?
Yes, she is.
Could you just give us a, could you be sworn in, please?
Good evening, Ms. Rodriguez. Just, you going to testify, or your husband as well?
Oh, yeah.
Desiree, can you hear me?
Yes, it's only me.
Only you. Okay, great. So please raise your right hand. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and give us your name, spell your last name.
Desiree Rodriguez.
And spell your last name.
Rodriguez.
And you live at 31 Coolidge Avenue, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just like the last application, explain to the board what you're doing at your home and why you're here this evening.
About ground pool.
Okay, and I will bring up the screen, a copy of the survey you submitted, so we can see that. Is everyone able to see that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can see it.
So the applicant, the home at Coolidge Avenue is on the top here, the house, the pool, this is a little bit of a faded scan of the survey, is going to be in this area, and this back corner has a garage. The distance between the garage and the pool is 2.5 feet. The ordinance requires that it be a minimum of 10 feet between the garage and the pool. Otherwise, the application is conforming.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the board? Hearing none, I open it up to the public. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this application? Make a motion to close it. I'm sorry, Joan, was that something?
No, I didn't see anyone.
Okay,
Looking to speak.
make a motion to close it to the public. What is your preference on this application?
Make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski. Mr. Corrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Savili,
Yes.
Mr. Emma,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
Okay, Desiree, your application's been approved, and you can go to the, for your permits after we memorialize it at our next meeting. All right, the next application, Carl, are we going to move on to these, or?
I think we will be, yes, because we have Mr. Corrigan on the line, but we'll, whichever application you want to do first, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I don't know which application you want to do
Well, I
first.
was going to go with the Epic Church one,
For the,
2105, and have the Cerebral Seaports next.
okay. So that is, why don't you call the application? That is
It's 2105, Epic
2105.
Church.
That's Ms. Jennings, that's your application.
Okay, thank you. So just, so how many board members do we have?
We have 6 members now.
Okay, so if we go forward, and at the end, we're not getting a warm and fuzzy feeling, can we carry for the 7th person to read the transcript? If we feel there's not a lot of issues, we'd go for a vote.
Yes, that's certainly acceptable, Donna.
All right, terrific. Okay, for the record, Donna Jennings from the law firm of Wilentz, Goldman and Spitzer on behalf of the applicant. As the board is aware, the applicant is here this evening seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval in connection with the installation of a community solar project in the parking lot of the Epic Church located at 2707 Main Street.
Donna,
Yes.
can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
Carl, could you explain, are you going to be the lawyer on this application, or is Rich going to be?
No, that's the other application is with Rich.
Okay, I thought it was both of them. I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead, Donna.
Sure. I was just given the address 2707 Main Street Extension and identified as lot 3.06 in block 257 on the borough's tax map. The proposed solar panels consist of a series of carports to be constructed in phases over the existing surface parking lot, as will be more particularly described by the applicant's witnesses. The property is located in the waterfront redevelopment area. However, the property is not part of the controlling redevelopment plan. Thus, although solar panels are specifically permitted pursuant to the redevelopment plan, the proposed solar panel use here is not permitted on this site since the original SED2 zone standards apply, which do not permit solar panels. Therefore, the applicant is also seeking a use variance to permit the installation of the solar panels on this site. In addition, under the SED2 standards, there's one bulk variance required with respect to the minimum rear yard setback for an accessory structure where 25 feet is required and 1.3 feet is proposed. Since the existing parking spaces are situated close to the property line and the panels are proposed to be placed over the existing parking spaces. The applicant is also requesting one design waiver or exception with respect to the required minimum foot candles, where a half a foot candle is required throughout commercial parking lots, and the illumination under the proposed solar canopies is less than a half a foot candle. In support of the development proposal, the applicant will rely on the testimony and exhibits to be presented by the following three witnesses: Corey Gross, the applicant's representative; Kevin Shelley, the applicant's site engineer; and Andrew Janu, the applicant's professional planner. Collectively, the record will demonstrate that the applicant is entitled to the requested relief. Specifically, with respect to the use variance request, the applicant will show that the statutory criteria has been met. That is, both the positive and the negative criteria for the granting of the use variance will be satisfied. Pursuant to the municipal land use law, the use is deemed inherently beneficial, thus satisfying the positive criteria as a matter of law. With respect to the negative criteria, the record will show that there will be no increase in traffic to the site and minimal impact on light, air, and open space if the use is permitted. Importantly, the use itself is permitted on the property surrounding the site, and so there will be no negative impact on the surrounding area by permitting solar panels on this site. Furthermore, it is the applicant's position that the one bulk variance request is essentially subsumed in the use variance grant per the Supreme Court's ruling in Price v. Himeji. That case recognizes that in granting a use variance on a particular parcel, the underlying bulk standards are inappropriate since the use itself was not considered when the governing body adopted those regulating bulk standards. And so if the board finds that the use is appropriate on this site, there's no requirement to independently justify every bulk variance request. The applicant's planner will go more in depth on the justification for the use variance and the other minor deviations. Finally, as a matter of record keeping, the applicant is in receipt of the following reports: the board planners report dated April 22nd, 2021. And there's two reports from the board engineers, one dated February 17th, 2021 that dealt with completeness, and then the March 18th, 2021 review letter. So with that, I'd like to call up our first witness, Corey Gross, the applicant's representative. And I don't know, I pre-marked exhibits. I don't know if we're going to share, screen share, or our own people do it, or how does that work here?
Yeah, Donna, so I have a couple comments maybe before you get to your first witness, but yes, your witnesses, if you give us their name, the secretary will move them over to panelist status and they can screen share and put the exhibits up. That's no problem. If I just may just take a minute just to quickly explain, and board members and members of the public, this applies to the next application as well, which is the same property, but it's a different application. It's an unusual situation. The property itself, the church, is in the redevelopment area, but the redevelopment plan has no provisions for the use of the property, bulk standards, side yard setback, all of those things. So it's kind of like a donut, a hole in the donut. So therefore, we have to rely upon the zoning ordinances, and a little bit of a wrinkle there, but we're also relying upon the zoning ordinances that gives this board jurisdiction. Normally, a redevelopment plan is heard by the planning board. The most recent zoning that would normally apply to this property actually excludes this lot. So we had to go back to the pre-1999 zoning ordinance to determine the permitted uses and these bulk standards that apply. That's detailed further in Mr. Barry's report, and Donna had alluded to it. And I want to just take a minute to explain it because it's a very odd situation. And just some people may be scratching their head as why is a property in a redevelopment area before the zoning board. So that's the reasons why. The upshot, all you have to remember is that it's a zoning application. They need variances, and we hear them just like any other application. And the other thing, Donna, I just wanted to, I don't want to get into back and forth with you on it. This board reads Price versus Himmigi differently. That case gives the board the ability to consider all the bulk variances subsumed. The board does not, so we would ask that your applicant put on your planner put on bulk variance testimony as well. If you want to do a combined Himmigi and an additional bulk variance testimony, I'll leave that up to you. We just wanted to let you know that we asked the planner to give normal bulk variance testimony as to those variances.
Yeah, no one
So-
understood. Understood.
Okay, Donna, thank you. So again, apologize for jumping in, but I figured it'd be easier to clear the record up on those issues. So please proceed with your first witness.
Sure, if you guys could unmute Corey Gross, the applicant's representative.
And does he need to screen share, Donna?
He's going to screen share that. All three of the witnesses have exhibits.
Okay, so why don't, Joan, if you would pull
Kevin Shelley
Mr. Gross
is on
over.
the screen. I don't see my planner, Andrew Janu. So we brought over too.
Okay. I think Mr. Gross just got pulled over and
Corey. Corey, you have to unmute yourself and your camera.
then Joan, if you would, there's a gentleman, Andrew Janu, JNIW. Will you pull him over as well?
Sure.
And is everybody else over, Donna?
That's everybody. Yep.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Hey, Donna, hold on one second. I didn't know I was sharing the community solar exhibit.
Oh, who's sharing it? Who's got it?
I can bring it. All right, guys, bring it up right now. Okay.
Mr. Gross,
Shall I?
You gotta get sworn
you
in.
need to swear in, sir. Please raise your right hand.
Sure.
You swear firm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please give us your name and spell your last name.
My name is Corey Gross,
You can put your-
Gross.
Thank you. Donna, please continue.
Sure. Corey, for the record, just give your position and title and number of years with the applicant, please.
Sure. So my name is Corey Gross. I am founder and COO of Solar Landscape. I've been with the company for 10 years now.
Okay, and your essential duties and responsibilities?
Yeah, so I oversee the design, permitting, and construction of all of our active solar projects.
And how many solar projects has the applicant received approval for so far?
We've submitted several solar applications in the state of New Jersey and received approvals for all of them to date.
Okay, and why did the applicant select this particular site?
Yeah, so we always drove past the Epic Church site when driving down the Parkway. We always thought it would be a great parking lot to host a solar site. So we decided to reach out to the Epic Church. Little did we know they were already interested in pursuing solar. So immediately from there we just started working together, and here we are now.
Okay, and if you could, what is community solar? Can you explain that? I think you had an exhibit.
Yeah, could you guys see my exhibit?
No, I can't.
Okay.
There you
Now
go.
you should be able to,
All
right?
right, so
Yeah.
this is what's marked as exhibit A1.
Mhm. So community solar is a new program that came out in 2018. Issued by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Solar refers to solar
Heard
facility.
a lot of feedback on you, Corey.
Is someone
Is it
else
possible to get closer to the microphone?
Whose phone number is 732-266-8264? They're giving a lot of feedback.
It's the TV.
Yeah, can you
Yeah, we got-
mute your phone?
Yeah, that's John.
Yeah,
That's,
if John, if you hit *6, it'll mute your phone. And if you need to talk, hit *6 to unmute it. Or Joan, can you?
There you go.
Here we
You
go.
got it.
Go ahead, Donna.
All right, I'm sorry, Corey. Can you repeat that? Because it was a lot of garbled.
Yeah, sure, no problem. How does it sound now?
It's better. Just sit closer to your computer, though, I think.
Okay, so community solar was issued in 2018 by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. Community solar refers to a local solar facility shared by multiple community subscribers who receive credit on their electrical bills for their shared power produced. The purpose of community solar is to provide equal access to clean renewable energy for homeowners, renters, and businesses alike. The model for community solar is becoming rapidly adopted nationwide and is considered the utility of the future. And I'll just give you some quick.
Yeah, describe the benefits to the residents of Sayreville, the local economy, and the church.
Sure, yeah. So the solar project will create enough clean energy to power approximately 400 homes annually. The power from the solar site will be sold to residents within the same municipality or adjacent municipalities. The subscribers purchasing the power will save 20% off the price of their current electrical utility bill. This says 10, but it should be 20. At least 51% of the power produced will be sold to low to moderate income residents, and they'll receive at least 25% off the price of the electricity supplied. There's no long-term contracts for purchasing the power. The subscribers can cancel at any time. The power produced will be 100% clean, renewable energy. Solar Landscape provides free career training to residents interested in the renewable energy trade. And the project will benefit the church, who will receive substantial rent payments for hosting the solar facility, which will help them provide capital for other improvements for the property.
Okay, and will the project be phased?
Yeah, the project's gonna happen in 4 phases, and our engineer could address that when he speaks.
And what about if you were to be approved? What is the anticipated construction schedule from start to finish?
Yeah, if the project's approved by the state, the construction schedule should be about 4 months. 2 months of steel erection and solar module installation for the canopies, and then about 2 months of electrical wiring.
All right, so you indicated when it's approved by the state. So what does that mean? You need an approval from the BPU?
Yeah, so we applied through the BPU with this project, and we're hoping to find out if this project was awarded by the state within 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And what is the lifespan of the panels once they're constructed and put in? How long do they last?
They last for 25 years.
Okay, and what happens to the panels after their useful life?
The panel frames could be recycled, the carport steel could be recycled, and then the glass gets thrown away.
And who's responsible for removing the panels?
Solar Landscape would be responsible for removing the panels at the end of the project, or at the end of its useful life.
Okay, that's all the direct testimony I have for Mr. Gross. Do you want us to just call our next witness, or how do you
Yeah,
guys?
you could do that, and we could have any questions at the end.
Yeah, actually, Don, what we do, I apologize. It's been a crazy week. I meant to talk to you before this evening. We have the applicant put on all of their witnesses first. Obviously, during the course of that, the board may have questions. When you're finished with all your witnesses, we will open up for the public for both comments and questions at one time, and then give you a chance to respond to any comments and questions of the public and give a closing argument.
Great, good, thanks. I prefer it that way. All right, so
Me
the
me
next
too.
witness is Kevin Shelley. Kevin, you there? I
Yes, I'm
think you
here.
Have to unshare your screen, Corey. Corey,
Yeah.
your screen's still up. There you go. All right, there's Kevin.
Good evening, Mr. Shelley. Please raise your right hand, sir. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And please give us your name and spell your last name for the record.
Kevin Shelley, Shelley.
Thank you. And Donna, turn it over. You asked to give a very short qualification of his of your expert, because
Sure.
I personally know him and he is certainly qualified.
Okay, Kevin, could you just give a brief background and qualifications?
Sure. I'm the owner of Shore Point Engineering. I'm a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey since 2012. I've testified in front of various boards across the state and in Middlesex County, most recently Old Bridge, Hillsborough, South Brunswick.
Okay, will the board accept his qualifications?
We accept his qualifications, yes.
Thank you. Just for the record, Kevin, were the plans prepared under your direction?
Yes.
Can you describe the site and the area around the site? And if you're going to refer to any exhibits, can you pull them up? They were all pre-marked and hopefully you have the exhibit number on them.
Yes, so I will share, if everyone's seen my screen.
Yep.
This is exhibit A1.
No, A2. That's A2 because,
Yes, excuse me, sorry, A2, which is the, just an existing aerial image of the property and surrounding areas. The properties known as Block 257, Lot 3.06, containing approximately 14 acres. It is located at 2707 Main Street Extension, located at the intersection of Chevalier Avenue. It's currently developed and occupied by Epic Church, which is a 2,500 seat place of worship with 861 space parking lot. As mentioned before, the property is located within the waterfront redevelopment area, and it's also, which is surrounding the Raritan Bay. So while the property is located in the waterfront redevelopment area, the property was excluded from the redevelopment plan. Therefore, the zoning of the property reverts to the SED2 zoning standards, which were in place at the time that the church was originally approved by the granting of a use variance by the zoning board back in 1996.
okay, can you describe the applicant's proposal, please? And if you're going to refer to another exhibit, just identify it for the record.
Yes, so I'm going to exhibit A3 now, which is a colorized rendering of the property. So the applicant is seeking to construct solar carports over portions of the existing parking lot. A total of 6,171 solar panel modules are proposed to be installed above 7 carport canopies over the existing parking lot. The solar panel modules are expected to have an annual production of over 3.1 gigawatt hours. And the carports will cover approximately 152,392 square feet in total area. And they will cantilever over approximately 586 existing parking spaces. Each carport will be supported with steel columns, which will be strategically placed on parking stall lines as to not impact any of the existing available parking once complete. The proposed carport canopies will not extend beyond the existing parking setbacks, except along the southern property line here, where the canopies will overhang the existing curb line by about 3 feet.
All right, so just to stop you there, because you're transcribing this, so saying it's here doesn't tell me exactly what corner you're talking about. So could you describe that verbally? What section that you're talking about?
So it's along the southern property line of the property. The existing parking and curb are about 4 feet from the property line, and our steel columns will be located up against the inside of the curb line there. Columns will come up and the canopy will overhang those columns by about 3 feet, which gives us about 1.3 feet to the property line there.
And that's the one bulk variance that the applicant seeking with this application?
That's correct.
Okay. I think there's also an equipment structure that's being proposed as well. Can you
Yeah, so there is also in the southeast corner of the existing building, there is a 20 by 40 foot electrical equipment area located adjacent to the building. The area will be screened with slatted chain link fence and landscaping, so it won't be visible from the street.
Okay, and then we discussed during Corey's testimony that this project is supposed to be phased. Can you describe the phasing?
Sure. So I'm going to switch to exhibit A4, which is a phasing plan. The carports will be installed over 4 phases, with the first phase it consists of 3 canopies in the northern parking area of the site, which is highlighted in purple. Phase 2 is 1 canopy along Main Street to the east, which is highlighted in green. Phase 3 is 2 sections in the southern parking area closest to the existing building, which is highlighted in blue. And the 4th phase consists of 1 canopy along the southern property line, which is shown here in red. Each phase is expected to take 3 to 4 weeks to complete. And as Corey mentioned, there's a total construction schedule of about 4 months.
Okay, now with,
The project's being phased to limit the impact on the available parking spaces for the church to the maximum extent feasible during construction. So, while they're constructing phase 1, this area will be inaccessible for parking, but the remainder of the site will remain open.
okay, now with respect to there's an application behind us. So there has been some consideration as to how this project is going to interact with the Riverton project. Can you describe that?
Sure. So I'm going to switch back to Exhibit A3 here, which this rendering shows not only the proposed carport installation, but also the improvements that are proposed as part of the other application. So the other application includes modifications to the driveways, parking, on-site circulation, lighting, and landscaping. Particularly, there's the new construction of 2 adjacent roads located to the south and to the north of the site. I'll show you up on here. And the applicant, the other developer is proposing to construct additional parking spaces located up in the top left corner of the screen, as well as the bottom left corner. And as you can see, the proposed carport canopies do not encroach or will not impact the other developer's ability to come in and reconstruct additional parking in these areas.
Okay, can you just address the lighting and the landscaping, please? Because I know there's a design exception with respect to the lighting under the canopy.
Yeah, so the right now there are small triangular shaped islands in between the parking stalls that have light poles and street trees in them or shade trees in them. So as these carports get constructed over the existing structures, the trees and existing light poles will obviously need to be removed. The poles that are being removed will be replaced with LED light fixtures mounted underneath carports. And I did speak with the board planner regarding the comments regarding the lighting waiver, and we believe that we can add some additional light fixtures underneath the carports so that we can provide a minimum of half a foot candle underneath each of these carports. So I don't believe a design waiver is necessary.
You think we can meet it? Okay.
I think we can meet it, yes.
Okay, and what about the landscaping?
So similar to the existing light poles that are being removed, a total of 67 trees will also be removed. Some of them are located within the parking stall islands, but majority of the trees, or I'd say half of the trees, are also going to be located up against the existing frontage along Main Street, where right now some of these trees are not in great condition. Some have grown too tall or too large. They're interfering or potentially interfering with overhead wires along that frontage as well. So we're going to be removing a total of 67 trees, of which 15 are currently dead or in bad condition. This removal, these 52 trees will require a total of 10 replacement trees with a minimum caliper of 3 inches. And we are providing a total of 19 trees throughout the site. And our plans will be revised to indicate that 3-inch caliper minimum so that we can make sure that we satisfactorily address the tree replacement requirement. But as you can see on the site rendering, we are going to be removing the trees along the Main Street frontage like I indicated, but we will be replacing them with additional trees as well as some evergreen screening and low vegetation to create a nice visual corridor down Main Street.
Ken, I believe you had another exhibit A5, just kind of shows the height and how the emergency
Yes.
vehicles can fit underneath. I think you should show that. Okay.
Right, so this is a rendered cross-section showing the two different types of carports that we have. One of them is a single support column in the middle with the canopy overhanging on both sides, and the other has two support columns and the canopy extending across multiple parking spaces. So there will be a minimum vertical clearance of 13.5 feet and a maximum clearance of 20 feet under both these carport types. And the 13.5 foot vertical clearance is the minimum required by the International Fire Code. And I've spoken with the fire marshal about the project. And in the event that higher vertical clearances are necessary, we'll agree to comply with fire marshal's requests if he believes we need to raise the minimum clearances. But based on our conversation, I think we both believe that the 13.5 foot minimum clearance is currently sufficient.
And
Now-
just for the record, that was exhibit A5, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and as you could see, this is a typical fire truck. Some parts of the carports will overhang out into the adjacent drive aisles, and there's more than enough vertical clearance for any emergency service vehicles to navigate either around the carports, or as you can see in the bottom rendering, they could even drive underneath them. So the carports themselves, the support column infrastructure will not impact current circulation on the site. All drive aisle widths and clearances that exist today will be maintained. And the applicant's simply going to be building over top of the existing drive aisles and parking areas.
Okay, and if you could, you had an opportunity to review the board consultants' reports.
Yes, I have.
Are there any particular issues that you'd like to address, or are we able to comply with everything?
No, I think we could agree to comply with everything, and I believe my testimony this evening addresses any of the other outstanding comments that required further explanation.
Okay, what other outside agency approvals does the applicant need, just for the record?
We need county site plan approval, which has already been submitted. And we've also submitted an application, or we've also on February 25th of this year, we appeared in front of the Sayreville Economic and Redevelopment Agency, which at that time designated Solar Landscape as the redeveloper of the subject property.
Okay, and then the BPU approval that Corey mentioned,
Correct.
there's no freehold soil conservation, I don't believe.
No, we don't believe that the improvements on the property would create a need for freehold soil conservation approval.
Okay, that's all the direct testimony I have for Mr. Shelley. So Andrew, yeah, there you are.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question before we move on?
Go ahead.
Thanks. Mr. Shelley, did you have an opportunity to review the street tree planting plan for Peter Fisher Boulevard, the southern edge of the property?
I do not have a copy of that plan for the street trees along Peter Fisher. If I can go back to our exhibit A3, what I believe is if the street trees are planted in this grass strip located between the curb and the sidewalk.
Yeah, we can't see your exhibit.
Oh, I stopped sharing it. Hold on. All right, we back? If the street trees are planted in the grass strip between the curb and the sidewalk along that future road there, that's located approximately 30 feet from the edge of our carport canopies. So we don't believe that any potential street trees along this future road would impact the efficiency of the carports or our project.
Okay, so that's really the thrust of my question for the board as well, is to make sure that you had an opportunity to look at that, and so that the trees as they grow do not start to cast shadows on the solar panels and diminish the efficiency, and then we get into possibly a request to trim the trees, et cetera. So just want to make sure that everything's interacting because I know we have a lot of moving parts.
Right, and that's why we put together this rendering showing, the two projects. And if that road was substantially closer to that, canopy and that carport area, then we may have concerns. But, like I said, that area is about 30 feet away from our carport. So I think we're comfortable with street trees in that location, not impacting our project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I think we can move on to Mr. Janu now.
Very good. Thank you.
Just have to swear you in first.
Yeah, sorry, I had it on mute. Mr. Janu, please raise your right hand, sir. You swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. And please give us your name, spell your last name for the record.
Andrew Janu, Janiw. I'm a principal with the firm of Beacon Planning and Consulting Services at 315 Highway 34, Colts Neck, New Jersey.
Thank you. Ms. Jennings?
Yes, Mr. Janu, if you could give the board the benefit of your qualifications, please.
Certainly. I am a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have a bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I'm currently serving as the planner for the Borough of Carteret, the redevelopment planner for the South Amboy Redevelopment Agency, and consulting planner to Plainsboro, Toms River, and Flemington. Represented applicants throughout the state of New Jersey, including in Sayreville previously. And
We accept those credentials.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have you had an opportunity to visit the site?
I have. I've been to the site. I reviewed the Sayreville master plan ordinances, the redevelopment plan that pertains to the property around us, as well as the application, the plans that were prepared for this evening, and the board's professionals review letters.
And if you could just, for the record, give your professional opinion as to whether or not the applicant has demonstrated the statutory criteria for the grant of the use variance, the bulk variance, and the design. Well, I guess we took away the design exception, just the bulk variance and the use variance.
Certainly. I believe Mr. Kem did a great job explaining how the predicament of how we have the SED zoning and the hole in the donut, if you will, here. So kind of moving on, we are essentially being reviewed under the SED 2 standards, which does not permit photovoltaic or solar panels within that. Therefore, we are seeking a D1 use variance for that use. The bulk variance that's triggered by this application under the SED2 standards is for a setback relief. We have 1.3 feet proposed along the southerly property line, where 25 feet is required in that district. That 1.3 feet follows the edge of the southerly parking lot. I believe Mr. Shelley indicated that parking lot comes to within 3 to 4 feet of the edge of the property, and there's a slight overhang with the panels that are being proposed in that area. And as Donna had mentioned, the issue with the design waiver for lighting has been resolved, and we will comply with that. So moving on to the variance relief that we're requesting. As we know, we are seeking a D1 variance for the solar panels. Solar panels are recognized by the state of New Jersey as an inherently beneficial use, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But I still like to reconcile these applications, not only with your master plan, but also with the municipal land use law in terms of furthering the purposes of zoning. Your master plan most recently made a recommendation for this area that included to, and I'll read this into the record, create new opportunities for emerging land uses, such as animal daycare facilities, solar land uses, and data centers. And that's exactly what happened. The redevelopment plan that surrounds our property has been updated as recently as 2013, and now allows the solar panels as an accessory use within that district. We were not part of that redevelopment plan. That did not filter down to us. The SED2 district, which does apply to us, was put in place at a time where solar panels weren't even contemplated in a use. So that whole donut, once again, takes a bite at us, where the surrounding land uses, this would be permitted over parking lots and on rooftops or on ground level mounts. But in this case, we are seeking the D1 use variance. With respect to the municipal land use law, as you know, the MLUL provides 16 purposes of zoning, which are essentially underscoring the public purposes that need to be reconciled with any application. In this instance, several would apply to this application. The first would be A, under the MLUL, which is to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about the inherently beneficial use aspects, but it's important to understand here that what we're proposing is a clean energy source. It's going to be solar panels. Not only that, it's going to be done on a complementary use, which is the parking lot that serves the Epic Church itself being an inherently beneficial use. So we have some great land use compatibility here. And as you know, these parking spaces aren't utilized all the time. So it's a great kind of cohabitation type of scenario. G under the MLUL would be to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. Again, what we have here is a church with a large parking lot that for a good part of the week goes fairly vacant. So putting these panels on over with carports really kind of creates some utility to the otherwise dormant use during the week. Whereas these panels could go in plain fields, whatever, but this is a great compatibility type thing where we're creating carports and utilizing space that's already developed. And finally, and to promote the utilization of renewable energy resources, and that's on point with this application. What we're proposing is a new facility of green energy. Not only that, it'll be a community project, which will then be able to resell low-cost energy to a good portion of the community and will benefit not only the immediate facility, but will create a better carbon footprint for the area. So there's a lot of benefits to this, and that's recognized within the MLUL. I did speak a little bit about inherently beneficial use. And what that means is within the municipal standards, the NJS 4055 D4 defines an inherently beneficial use as a use which is universally considered of value to the community because it fundamentally serves the public good and promotes the general welfare. Such a use includes, but is not limited to, a hospital, a school, child care facility, group home, or wind, solar, or photovoltaic energy facility or structure. We are a use that's included within the definition of inherently beneficial use. And what that means by being so designated is that we presumably satisfy the positive portion of the D1 variance, meaning we don't have to go into particular suitability. This use is considered so important that the positive aspects of the use variance are considered satisfied. So in an inherently beneficial use application, we have to change our focus to the impacts of the use or the negative criteria. And the courts determined in a case called Sika v. Wall Township, and Sika was a head trauma center that was being proposed. But the Sika court said that when we're dealing with an inherently beneficial use or a use that's so recognized, when the focus changes to the negative criteria, there are really four things that we have to address. And that's known commonly in the planning world as the Sika test. And those 4 points are: 1, to identify the public interest at stake; 2, to identify any detrimental effect that would ensue from the grant of that variance; 3, to study whether the detrimental effect could be mitigated by imposing reasonable standards; and 4, then weighing the positive against the negative criteria. So going through those criteria, the public interest at stake here is the generation of clean energy. Solar facilities, such as the community facility, will generate low-cost energy, savings over traditional utility rates, and then be the added benefit of cohabitating with another inherently beneficial use, the church, which will benefit and complement from the use in the facility being co-located there. The solar landscape also proposes within their program free job training for renewable energy resources. So there's quite a few aspects in terms of the public interest that's satisfied with this application. Criteria 2 is to identify any detrimental effect that would ensue from the grant of the variance. Typically, when we look at detrimental impacts, we look at what I call the nuisance issues: noise, traffic, trash. And those really don't apply here because this isn't going to create any of those. The largest concern typically with a solar facility would be the visual impact, but in this case, the property is surrounded in large part by vacant land that will be developed in the future. This will cover existing parking in a fairly low scale, non-intrusive type manner. It will be screened along the easterly property line with landscaping. I think Mr. Shelley indicated how that will be supplemented and replaced. So I think when we look at the visual aspects, while the panels will be seen, they will create shade and cover for parking, and they won't be in such a manner that would be intrusive to any of the neighborhood. So criterion 3 then is to study whether the detrimental effect could be mitigated. We talked about the scale of these carports and how the landscaping will be supplemented along the easterly property to shelter those essentially from view along the passing cars. So I think that those are reasonable aspects in terms of softening the impact in terms of the visual. Then finally, weighing the positive against the negative criteria. The negative criteria, quite frankly, is somewhat de minimis when we're really looking at just the potential for a visual impact here. While the benefits of creating clean energy are something that's recognized as so important to presumably satisfy the positive criteria. So I do think when we look at all these in concert, we do satisfy the 4 prongs of the SECA test, and that this application satisfies the requirements for the D1 use variance. With respect to the bulk standard that we are seeking deviation, we are requesting for a setback of 1.3 feet where 25 feet is required. Keeping in mind the 25 feet is a standard from the SED district. The redevelopment plan surrounding us actually permits parking right up to the property line. So not only does it permit solar facilities on the property, but it permits parking directly to the property line, as well as parking related structures directly to the property line. So if you're looking at a carport, it's not unusual to imply here that those carports would be permitted in the surrounding uses to go directly up to the property line. So essentially what we're proposing at the location we're proposing would be permitted all around us, but because we're that hole in the donut where that redevelopment plan doesn't apply, we would have to satisfy the C2 criteria here. Now, quite frankly, we could satisfy this under the C1, which means that there is an existing condition that prompts this. And that existing condition is the location of the parking facility in such close proximity to the southern property line. But when we look at the balance test, we have to look at the positive and negative criteria, which everyone knows the 5 prongs of the C2 test. First is that it relates to a specific piece of property, and it does. The second, that it promotes purposes of zoning, and I read those purposes of the municipal land use law that are satisfied by this application into the record. And the third, that there is a public benefit, or there's a benefit to this, and that is, again, the generation of clean energy and the co-location of these carports coincidental to the perimeter of the parking facilities, because these carports are intended to shelter the parking spaces. So essentially, it's natural to assume they will follow the line of the parking, and along the southern property line, we do have parking in close proximity to the property line. We then go to the negative criteria under the C2, and one is that there is no substantial detriment to the public good. And again, there's nothing here that's substantial. There's a slight impact in terms of visual, but again, this will be located proximate to a new roadway, as Mr. Shelley showed on that previous exhibit. That roadway will have at least a 30-foot distance to the property line. The issues with the trees that'll be planted along that roadway will not create any detrimental impact to the panels. So I think in concert, this is a good marriage in terms of where these panels are located and what the future holds in terms of the adjacent use of the property. And then finally is that under the negative criteria is that this won't have a negative impact on your land use plan or ordinances. And I don't believe it does. Again, we have somewhat of an anomaly here where it's kind of the forgotten zoning of SCD2 that still applies here. But all around us, this is a permitted use and arguably right up to the property line. So I don't think there's anything here that would be deemed to be detrimental to any of the surrounding properties. So on balance, I think we can satisfy the setback variance under the C2 criteria, as well as the D1 variance relief having been satisfied. So I think this application from all aspects can be approved by this board.
Thank you, Andrew. That's all the direct testimony we have from Mr. Janin.
Thank you, Donna. Let me ask you, Jay, first. Have they covered everything that you might be concerned about?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we had a technical review meeting with the applicant. His engineer submitted revised plans that addressed the majority of our comments. We had still a couple that were remaining, and he did address those in testimony tonight, so he has addressed all our concerns.
Thank you. And John, what about yourself?
Yes, Mr. Shelley's testimony addressed a couple of the items that I had raised with the lighting and the landscaping. And Mr. Janitor's testimony hit all the marks for the planning proofs. I have no further questions for them.
Oh, good. It sounds like a great project, but I just have a couple questions, I guess, for Corey Gross might be the right person to answer. You had mentioned about, I guess, 400 homes might benefit from reduced rates, I guess, low income individuals. How is that structured and how is that decided? Who would be getting those, the benefit of the lower rate?
Sure, yeah. So first off, since the site location is in JCP&L power company territory, we're allowed to sell power to anyone within Sayreville and the adjoining townships that cut Sayreville within JCP&L territory. As far as the benefits for subscribing for the community solar, it's on a first come, first served basis. But as I said, we're obligated to sell 51% of that power to low and moderate income subscribers. And essentially, we have a a verification button when they sign up through the online portal. That if they prove that they're low to moderate income, then they get more savings than the people that are just normal subscribers to the solar facility.
I see. Now, I'm thinking about the Sayreville residents in particular. How would we be notified that this is open? Because you did say first come, first would get the benefit. Is there any way that Sayreville could be like put up first, within the community that you would be trying to sell this to?
Absolutely, we'd be working. We'd be willing to work with the township and do whatever it took to make sure that the Sayreville community gets the power first. I mean, that's exactly what we want to do.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions myself except for those couple. Like I said, I think it's a great project. Is there any questions from the board at this time? Hearing no questions, we'll open up to the public.
Mr. Chairman, before we do, again, for members of the public, if you're online, next to your name, there's a hand raising feature. If you're on telephone, hit *9.
Joan, do you see anybody there?
No, I do not.
Okay, make a motion that we close the public portion.
Actually, who is it? This is, no, I don't see anyone.
Okay, thank you. Yes, make a motion to close the public portion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Don, would you like to summarize your application?
Yeah, just very quickly. I mean, this is obviously, we're dealing with inherently beneficial use. It'll not only benefit the residents of Sayreville, but it's going to produce, 100% clean, renewable energy, which is significant and important. And it will also help the church out, which is also inherently beneficial use because they're going to get rent payments and they'll be able to have additional capital improvements to the church. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask you, Don, do you want to move forward for a vote at this time?
I do, since I didn't see any particular concerns, I'd like to go for the vote. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, what's your pleasure on this application?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Is there a second?
Board members, you might want to unmute your microphones.
I think Tom is trying to say, he's got his hand raised. Because I don't want to pronounce his last name wrong.
Kaczynski.
Yeah.
Tom, are you in favor of this application, seconding the motion? Yes, okay.
Yeah, Tom, use the thumbs up. Okay, so there's a second. If anyone has a problem, we can use thumbs up, thumbs down for voting too.
Yes. Joan, roll call, please.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
That's a yes.
Mr. Corrigan, Mr. Corrigan,
Yeah, Mr. Corrigan, if you're muted, hit *6. That'll unmute you.
Yes.
That was a yes.
Mr. Billy,
Is that me, Joan? Yes, yes. Yes.
Mr. Emma,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito,
Yes.
That's everybody. 6 votes. Application's
All right.
approved.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a great evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Take care. I have them all warmed up for you, Jennifer. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have the last application. Did we want to take a break at all, or are we fine?
Jennifer's usually succinct, so I say we roll through.
Okay,
And
application.
Mr. Chairman has indicated before you call the application, I have a conflict on this application, and we have a conflict attorney, Richard Briglidario, who's on the line, who will take you through the application. I will stay on the line since I know procedure and issues with the board, so if you need me, I will be here. I'll just turn my video off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for filling in, Mr. Briglidario.
My pleasure.
Last one.
All right, application number 2106, Cerebral Seaport Associates. Do we have someone here?
Yes, this is Jennifer Phillips Smith. I would ask if I could be promoted to a presenter so you could see my video. And Ms. Joan, if you could also promote.
just give me 1 second, Jen.
Or
Mr. Chairman, maybe while that's going on, I'd just like to put on the record that I've been provided with the affidavit of service and notice of publication from Ms. Smith on behalf of her client. I've had an opportunity to review it, and notice has been complied with in accordance with the municipal land use law, such that the board does have jurisdiction to proceed with that application tonight.
Thank you.
You're in, Jen.
We can see her.
thank you so much, Joan. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, if you could also bring in Jeanette Perez and Dan Bush. I see Dan Bush there, and I think Ray Liotta we have. But if you could look for Jeanette Perez, very helpful.
Okay, Dan Bush. Okay, and Jeanette Perez, you said?
Correct.
Okay, they're in.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, members.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for the record, my name is Jennifer Phillips Smith. I am an attorney with Gibbons PC, and I am here tonight on behalf of Cerebral Seaport Associates Urban Renewal LP. This is an unusual situation where you have back-to-back applications involving the same property, 2 different set of improvements. So the Epic Church lot, as you know,
Jen, you're breaking up, or is there something going on?
I think we need to mute Mr. Corrigan's line again.
John, did you hear that?
You gotta press *6, John.
I just did.
Try one more time. There we go. Thanks.
There you go. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. So as I was saying, this is the unusual situation where you have back-to-back applications involving the same property at Block 257, Lot 3.06. My client, Cerebral Seaport Associates Urban Renewal, is the master redeveloper for parcels B and C within the waterfront redevelopment area. Parcel C surrounds the Epic Church parcel on 3 sides. Now, why is the master developer for the waterfront redevelopment area here before you? That relates back to approvals that we received. We received specifically preliminary and final major site plan approval from the planning board back in December of 2019, which was memorialized in a resolution adopted in January of 2020. As part of that approval, which was for the first 3 subphases of what you may know as the Riverton project, we were required to obtain property from Epic Church along the existing Chevalier Avenue and the proposed Peter Fisher Boulevard to widen those roadways to allow for access into the Riverton parcel. By widening those roadways, it required the parking lot for Epic Church to be reconfigured so that there would be more parking added, so that the overall would maintain around the same level of parking as they have today. There's also certain utilities and access changes that are needed to tie into the larger Riverton redevelopment. So we are here today seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval for the Epic Church parcel. We are also seeking a D1 variance. As you heard with the prior application, the church was granted a D1 use variance back around 1996. Therefore, any changes we make to the property, to the parking lots, trigger the need to come back to you to modify that use variance. We are not proposing to modify the church building at all, just the parking lots and the access and utilities around it. We are also requesting 4 design waivers related to the lighting intensity, the parking striping, the parking within the setback, and certain configurations of sidewalks. As you heard, although the Epic Church property is within the waterfront redevelopment plan area, the zoning that controls is the SED2 zoning, and specifically the zoning that was in place back in the 90s. That's the same zoning that you just applied to the prior application involving the solar canopies. We have here this evening 3 witnesses for you. We have Jeanette Perez, who's part of our project team for the Riverton project, Daniel Bush from Colliers Engineering, formerly known as Mazer, and Ray Liotta, who is our landscape architect and planner, also from Colliers. I did hear while I was coming into the Zoom that Mr. Brigliadoro was kind enough to acknowledge that we already provided our affidavit of notice, and it's been accepted by the board. So without anything further, I would like to bring up Jeanette Perez to be sworn in, and then we will mark our exhibits.
Thank you. Ms. Perez, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give before this board is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Please tell us your name and spell your name for the record.
Jeanette Perez, last name Perez.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Mr. Chairman, the witness has been sworn.
Thank you.
Excellent. Now, before I start asking Ms. Perez questions, we would like to screen share our exhibits. I think Mr. Bush is going to do the screen sharing. You can wait for that to come up. And if he doesn't get it to come up, I will in a moment.
It's on its way, Jen. Bear with me.
Thank you. So while that is loading, we'll go ahead and start to mark it. We provided an exhibit package to the board that consists of 6 sheets in a PDF. I'd like to mark the entire package as A1. And that is already up on the Sayreville website for anyone following along at home. All right, while that's coming up, we'll start with Ms. Perez. So Ms. Perez, can you please, for the board, describe your role with the Riverton project and your background in education?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Jeanette Perez, and I'm the Senior Project Manager of the Riverton Project. I have a bachelor's in construction management from Pratt Institute. I've been in construction project management for over 20 years. I joined the Riverton Project in June of 2019.
Excellent. All right. Well, what is the Riverton project? I know we've talked about how this evening we're here because we need certain improvements that are a condition of our prior approvals, but what is Riverton?
Sure. Some of you may be familiar with the Riverton project, but today we just wanted to give you a brief overview of the project. Riverton is a mixed-use development planned for the redevelopment of the former National Lead site. After decades of industrial use, the property is being remediated, repaired, and being made ready for redevelopment. In 2018, Sarah approved the concept plan for the project, which has been refined over the last few years in its latest form, which was recently approved in January of 2021.
And I'll pause there for a moment to see if Mr. Bush is able to get those slides up, because I believe we have a concept plan depiction. If not, Mr. Bush, if you're having difficulty, I can attempt to get them up myself.
Yeah, it just keeps giving me a failure message, so apologize.
Let's see, maybe I can pull them up on my end at least to start, and then we can swap them out. I know you have a higher resolution set. Oh,
think
here we
I-
go.
There we go.
You got it. You got it. All right. All right. So, Mr. Bush, if you could, the first slide is simply just a cover note so everyone knows what slides we're looking at. So let's look here at sheet 2 within Exhibit A1. So, Ms. Perez, is this the concept plan that you were just referring to?
Yes, this is the one that was most recently approved in January of 2021.
And
Riverton, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. What's part of the Riverton project? Go ahead.
So in addition to the Bass Pro Shops, which you will see along the entrance of Chevalier Avenue, because this project development has 2 entrances, one along Chevalier Avenue and the other one along Peter Fisher Boulevard. So as you enter the project development on Chevalier Avenue, you'll see the Epic Church International property. And just north of that, you'll see the Bass Pro Shops.
And for those watching at home, the Epic Church is in the gray color, correct?
That is correct.
And the proposed Bass Pro Shops is in the pink. Is that correct?
That is correct as well.
All right, please continue. I'm sorry.
In addition to having the Bass Pro Shops as an anchor tenant, we're going to have other approved uses. As you'll see on the screen, we have 1.3 million square feet of retail, 2 million square feet of office and commercial, 622,000 square feet of hotel and conference center, and 2,000 residential units.
All right, Mr. Bush, if you could go to the next slide, sheet 3 of A1. Ms. Perez, can you describe these pictures and sort of how they represent the core of Riverton?
Sure, this picture represents the atmosphere that we're looking to provide at Riverton, the community, the feeling, the experience that every guest will feel once they come here. You can see in the lower right-hand corner, the outdoor dining. You can see there will be ice skating rink on the lower left. On the upper left, you'll also see the Bass Pro Shops. One of the things we do in our communities is that we develop events through and sponsor events throughout the year so that we can bring all the communities together. But this is just an example of what we're looking to create for residents and visitors alike here at Riverton.
Right, and going to the next slide, which is the 4th sheet within A1. What is on this slide, Ms. Perez?
So here you'll see the site plan, the partial site plan approval. Back in December of 2019, the project went before the Sayreville Planning Board for site plan approval of the phase 1 of the development. A conditional approval was granted and was memorialized with a resolution in January of 2020, as you mentioned previously.
And if you could just describe some of the components within that first phase.
Sure, as we mentioned previously, as you see in the pink, just as you enter, is going to be the Bass Pro. As you continue along Chevalier Avenue, you will see the yellow property that's striped is a multifamily. The blue striped property is office. The purple with the striped is the hotel and conference center. In that same area, which we're calling the Village East, you're going to see other retail. At the entrance of Peter Fisher Boulevard, you will see retail as well.
Right. Now, as part of that approval that you mentioned that was memorialized in January of 2020, what condition was imposed that is relevant for the application this evening?
Well, one of the conditions that was imposed was the widening of Chevalier Avenue. So there are certain roadways that need to be constructed and modified in Chevalier Avenue as well as Peter Fisher Boulevard. And also includes, there are other conditions which Collier's Engineering will get into later on in their testimony, but it also included construction of utility improvements as well.
And Mr. Bush, if you could go to the next slide. This is the 5th sheet within the PDF. Can you describe this sheet for us, Ms. Perez?
Sure, here you will see the landscaping that's going to frame the entrance of the development along Chevalier Avenue. Will continue into the heart of the development. This is going to ensure that the guest experience arrives at the very, they will have the guest experience at the moment they arrive.
And is it accurate to say that in order for SSA to construct the roadway improvements that the planning board approves, that we also now need the zoning board's approval to make modifications to the Epic Church site?
Yes, that is one of the conditions that we need to meet with our planning board resolution.
Right. Those are all the questions that I have for Ms. Perez.
You can go on to your next witness.
Excellent, thank you. Our next witness will be Dan Bush, who is our civil engineer. Mr. Bush, are you there? That way, we'll make sure everyone can hear you.
Mr. Bush, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give before this board is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please tell us your name, spell your last name for the record, sir.
Sure. Dan Bush, B-U-S-C-H.
Excellent. Mr. Bush, for the benefit of the board, can you describe your education, your experience, and your licensure in the field of civil engineering?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Civil Engineering from the University of Delaware. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. These plans were prepared under my direct supervision. I've testified numerous times before the planning board. I don't believe I've ever testified before the Sayreville Zoning Board. I've been involved with the Riverton application for over 10 years and very familiar with the Epic Church facility.
Accept your qualifications.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So, Mr. Bush, as our expert engineer, if you can begin by describing the location of the site and the improvements that are proposed.
Sure. So let me just first give a framework for this, for the exhibit. This is a landscape rendering of the site plan. In addition, we've included components of the Riverton development, the landscaping, and the new future Peter Fisher Boulevard on the south side of the Epic Church, and the future Riverton Boulevard on the north side, including their access points on Main Street Extension. So frames the application with respect to the surrounding development. And then we've also identified for reference from the previous application, in these dashed lines, you can see the location of the proposed solar panels from the prior application. With this application, there's basically 7 major components. A new parking lot here on the north side, reconfiguration of the parking in the southwest side, which includes filling in the existing detention basin and constructing a parking lot in that location, the construction of a full movement signalized intersection on Peter Fisher, which I'll get into in more detail, closing of a existing right-out driveway located in the vicinity intersection of Peter Fisher Boulevard, the reconfiguration of the driveway on Chevalier Avenue to right in, right out. And then there's some right-of-way and easement acquisition along what is currently Chevalier Avenue to allow for the road construction that you see here. And that also results in the removal of a row of parking stalls within the Epic Church parking lot. And then we have 2 other components. With the removal of the stormwater basin, we connect the Epic Church stormwater into the Riverton system on Peter Fisher. And in addition, there is an existing small sanitary sewer pump station located in the southeast corner. We picked that up with a gravity main extending from near the southeast corner of the site into Peter Fisher Boulevard, and that brings the sanitary sewer into the river development, which ultimately goes to a new pump station that we're constructing for the project. There is, as noted, there's no changes whatsoever to the building. These are all site improvements. There's absolutely no changes to the building whatsoever. Just kind of getting into the details, because this is really, as you can see, parking related, parking and access related, just kind of getting into the specifics of that. There is currently 860 parking stalls on the site, where 849 are required. So, and with this application, we add an additional 4 spaces. So we have a total of 864 spaces. So we are certainly well in excess of what's required by ordinance, by about 15 stalls to be precise. There's this parking lot on the north side is 83 parking stalls. There is the 34 I indicated that are removed here on the adjacent to currently Chevalier, and then this reconfiguration of the parking lot here on the southwest side. And then we add 4 additional stalls when we close off this existing access drive in this location. There are 2 design waivers associated with the parking. The first is on the south side adjacent to Peter Fisher Boulevard. The existing parking stalls are 3.2 feet from the existing property line, where 5 is required. We're proposing to retain that. We're not going to change that existing setback. So these couple of additional stalls in the southwest corner retain that same 3.2 feet. So we're requesting a waiver for that. In addition, all the existing parking on the site is standard straight single parking stripes, where the ordinance calls for hairpin striping. We propose to retain that single line striping. So those are 2 waivers associated with the parking. The most, what I would say is the most important change and improvement for the site is with respect to access. These improvements proposed provide much greater access and much better access for the site, particularly the new access in the southwest corner onto Peter Fisher. That now provides direct access to and from the parkway. It provides for a means to make a left turn in from Main Street Extension northbound without having to go through the intersection of Chevalier Avenue. It provides relief from what is the driveway that is now on Chevalier Avenue, which basically right now is the only means to get to the parkway and get northbound, where with this configuration, you'll be able to exit out of Peter Fisher and go north on Main Street Extension and access the parkway that way. So dramatically better circulation and access to the adjacent roadway system with this plan. We've also improved the access to pedestrian access. There is new sidewalk that will be constructed on Peter Fisher, which will provide access into the site for the public. There will also be a new internal sidewalk leading from Peter Fisher to access the building on the south side. And the new parking lot in the northwest corner, we are proposing the construction of a sidewalk from that parking lot to connect to the existing sidewalk that provides access directly to the church. So, good improvements, better improvements from both vehicular and a pedestrian standpoint. There are 2 waivers with respect to sidewalk. Although we are certainly improving the sidewalk and pedestrian access to the building, the ordinance technically requires, and the language is fairly broad, but basically sidewalks between, basically any area of the parking lot and the building. Obviously, we're addressing the new parking lots that we're constructing. The existing parking lots remain, the existing parking areas remain as they are with their current pedestrian access as they are. In addition, there is no proposed sidewalk on Main Street Extension. As I indicated, the public access to the site from the public streets is from Peter Fisher. So that is provided. There is no connectivity with respect to sidewalk from adjacent sites on Main Street Extension. So we would request a waiver for providing sidewalk on Main Street Extension. Just briefly touching on the changes to the lot. So the lot goes from 13.99 acres to 13.68 acres. And that's effectively associated with the right-of-way that's needed for expanding Riverton Boulevard Chevalier, AKA Chevalier Avenue. And it's effectively allows the construction of the dedicated right turn movement, the eastbound right turn movement. And then we've expanded there's an existing utility easement there. We're expanding that easement to provide for new utilities to run down what will be Riverton Boulevard, and also create the landscape access entry into the Riverton project, which is illustrated on the rendering that Ms. Perez described in her testimony. That's how the lot changes are. With respect to the northerly parking lot, and you can see adjacent to it, there is a wooded area there. There is an area of existing wetlands that is in that area. The existing wetlands and buffer that will remain are roughly 1 acre. There's a small isolated wetland which is on the south side of the new parking lot, which will be filled under what's called a general permit number 6. And the sidewalk that we are proposing to construct from that parking lot to the building requires a GP10, which we will obtain. And there's also some what's called buffer averaging, transition area waiver for buffer averaging. So that's how we address the needs for, and that would be the only outside approval that we would require. And then just with respect to the stormwater management, the water quality that's required for this project under the stormwater rules is addressed by connecting the site to the Riverton stormwater management system, which has a large wet pond adjacent to the Raritan River, which provides for all the water quality needs for the basically 3/4 of what is identified as parcel C, as well as for Epic Church. So we've accounted for that water quality in the Riverton wet pond. However, on this site, the Riverton project itself is exempt from groundwater recharge. However, the Epic Church project site is not. And in order to provide for the groundwater recharge requirement, we're adding a porous pavement for some of the parking stalls in this northern parking lot. It's a pretty typical means to provide for groundwater recharge. In Mr. Cornell's letter, he has a number of comments that speak to the requirements under what's called the BMP manual, best management practices, which requires us to do test fitting to demonstrate clearance as a seasonal high, percolation, things of that nature. And I've had an opportunity to review that letter, and we can agree to comply with not only those stormwater management comments, but there are other comments in Mr. Cornell's letter that we can agree to address. And lastly is just to speak to removal, like I said, cutting off of the existing sanitary sewer pump station in that southeast corner, and then just connecting it to, like I indicated, to the sanitary sewer system to be constructed in Peter Fisher. Otherwise, there's no other utility changes with the site. And that's basically all I had for direct.
Great. So just as a note, we will have Mr. Leota provide the landscaping and lighting testimony.
Thank you. Yep.
And I know that you just addressed Mr. Cornell's letter dated April 28th of 2021, and that we will comply with all of the requirements in that letter, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And then one other item that came up today, we received just before the meeting a letter from the New Jersey Turnpike Authority dated April 28th, 2021. And they indicated that they generally had no objections to the proposed project, provided that one comment below is addressed and read into the record. And so I'm going to read it into the record as they've requested. It indicates that the right-of-way line as shown on the east side of Main Street Extension appears to be approximated and not shown correctly. Right-of-way lines should be verified in this area and called out appropriately on the plans. So, Mr. Bush, is that something that the applicant can do as a condition of approval?
Correct. And just for clarification, this is on the opposite side of the site. This does not directly affect the site whatsoever.
And so that right-of-way area, just if we're looking at the last page of A1 there, if you could point out Main Street extension, and then the right-of-way we're talking about would be on the bottom of the page across the street. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay. So we wanted to make sure that we read that comment into the record at the Turnpike Authority's request and that we will comply with their recommendation. And with that, those are the only comments that I have, or sorry, questions I have for Mr. Bush, and I would proceed to calling up Mr. Leota.
Go ahead.
Right. Right, Mr. Leota, if you're turning on your video, I can see you on the screen here.
I don't have a button to turn on my video unless you can do it.
I cannot, but I can hear you.
I think he needs to be promoted.
Yeah, I need to
Joan,
be a
could you,
panelist.
could you promote him to a panelist?
Sure.
I thought I did.
Yeah, I see him in attendees still. Ray Liotta.
I thought I did, sorry.
It's okay, we'll get there.
Okay.
We will give him a moment to come online. You know, when I was promoted, you sort of get kicked out for a moment in the spiraling circle.
Yeah, I got worried there. I got kicked out for about a second. Okay, we're here.
And you come
Mr.
back in.
Leota, I'm going to swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you're about to give before this board is going to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please tell us your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
It is Raymond C. Liotta, Liotta.
And Mr. Leota, in an effort to qualify you before the board as both a landscape architect and a professional planner, can you please describe your qualifications, licensure, and experience?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from Rutgers. I've been a licensed landscape architect since 1985 and a licensed planner since 1988. I've testified in about 100 different municipalities throughout New Jersey in both capacities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So we're going to have you put on your landscape architect hat first and then proceed to planning at the end, later in your testimony. So if you could please describe the landscaping that is proposed as part of this application.
All right, and we're going to leave the site plan rendering up because the landscape lighting and planning testimony will be using this exhibit. So in terms of the landscaping on the Epic Church proposed plan, it's been designed following the borough landscape architecture guidelines, and that includes several things. It includes street tree plantings along Riverton, or the future Riverton Boulevard, which is on the north end or the right side of the exhibit, and the future Peter Fisher Boulevard, which is on the south side of the church site or on the left. And those street trees are being provided and the ordinance being satisfied through the street tree plan of the overall Riverton Street Tree Development Project. And as you can see in the exhibit, the street trees from that plan have been introduced into the exhibit. So they're essentially the trees that are just outside the yellow boundary of the church property on the Peter Fisher Boulevard side, and on the right side or the north side, it's all the trees to the right of the yellow line, as well as the trees outside the dedication area along the future Riverton Boulevard. Parking lot landscaping is required at 1 tree for every 20 parking spaces. 10 trees are required by this application and 10 are provided, so the plan complies with that standard. Parking lot landscape area percentage, 10% of the parking area is required to be provided within the parking fields, which equates to about 6,800 square feet of landscape islands, where the plan proposes almost 14,000 square feet. So the plan complies with that standard. The off-street parking ordinance also has a tree, a parking lot tree requirement of one tree for every 10 parking spaces. That requires 19 trees, and the 19 trees are included in the plan. So for those standards, the submitted plan is compliant. The overall landscape design is utilizing, for the most part, trees, shrubs, and ground covers that are native in general and zone tolerant. The car parking lots have more than ample plantings and landscape items within the islands per ordinance requirements. The site plan exhibit, as I indicated, includes the overall street tree planting plan as indicated in the Riverton Development Project plans. Now, the other landscape element that we needed to provide per ordinance and application submittal requirements was a tree inventory and an assessment of a tree replacement requirement. So what we did was the tree inventory was conducted in accordance with the ordinance requirements, which indicates that we have to locate and identify all the trees that are 4-inch caliper or greater within the areas of disturbance, and that was done. For the most part, the disturbance is occurring that's disturbing trees in the northwest corner where the northern property or parking lot is. The ordinance has 3 different components to it. There's a replacement requirement for trees that are between 4 and 16-inch caliper, trees that are 16-inch caliper or greater, and then there's an additional tree replacement requirement in that ordinance that is in addition to the other landscape requirements in the landscape design sections of the ordinance. In summary, on the replacement requirements, due to the number of trees being removed, we have to replace 123 trees. We have 30 trees in the plan that are in addition to the other landscape requirements that I described earlier. So we have a tree replacement deficit of 93 trees in this current plan. And the applicant has agreed to pay the required fee of the tree replacement deficit. So the money will go into the tree replacement fund, and then the borough has the opportunity to utilize the funds to plant trees in an area that it feels is appropriate. It could be in the parks or on additional public land. To describe in a little more detail some of the tree removal in the area, the wooded area near the northern parking lot, that wooded area is about 75,590 square feet. It's about 1.73 acres. And the amount of woodland removal to construct this northern parking lot is a little more than 10,000 square feet. And in that area, we're estimating that a total of 32 trees are being removed for the northern parking lot. And throughout the site, a total of 48 trees are being removed. So the removal of the trees for the northern parking lot is less than 10% of what the current woodland area is. And the trees specifically adjacent to the parking lot to the south of the proposed parking lot, there are 21 trees in that area, and that's a little bit more than 6% of that area. So the numbers are fairly small, and we have agreed to paying the fee to replace those the trees in the deficit. That's essentially the landscape plan testimony, and I'm open for questions on that, or I can move on.
Perhaps we can move to the lighting and then circle back to questions at the end.
Sure.
You could describe the proposed modifications to the lighting plans.
Okay, so the fixture and the mounting height information is as follows. So what we have are 2 things. We have existing and we have proposed. So the existing poles and fixtures in the area that is not going to be disturbed by any of the proposed church improvements. It's a decorative acorn style fixture that sits on top of a 12-foot high fluted decorative pole that's painted black. The fixtures themselves have high-pressure sodium luminaires inside them. The bulbs are high-pressure sodium, so it emits a yellowish type of a light. And various existing fixtures in the area of the improvements were not operating when we conducted an inventory. So those fixtures on the plan that are going to remain that were not operating are going to be relamped as an interim step prior to the solar panel implementation. So the church, as you heard from the prior application, will be implementing a solar canopy plan in the future. And when it does this, some of the existing poles in those areas will be removed, and the lighting under the canopies will be accommodated through LED lighting in the underside of the canopies as described by the prior applicant. And those lights are LED 4000K color temperature, which is essentially a whitish type of a light. Now, to try to be consistent with that canopy design, the proposed lighting in the north parking lot and the south parking lot, as indicated on the exhibit, will be new LED fixtures, where the pole and the luminaire acorn style fixture will match the appearance of the existing fixtures on site, but they will all be new LED fixtures. So the mounting height, the color temperature at 4000K will match the solar panel lighting. So subsequent to all the construction happening, all the lighting on the site will be LED, which is the new technology. And with respects to the photometric statistics, the plan does comply with the parking lot and sidewalk minimum requirements within the ordinance. So there is no waiver with respect to the site for those areas. There is only a one waiver we're asking for in the southern parking lot along the western property line of the southern parking lot, where we have two fixtures adjacent to the property line, which are spilling light over the property line slightly above a ½ foot candle. But the lighting levels will drop to within and below a ½ foot candle within 10 feet of the property line. But we are requesting that waiver as part of the lighting plan. That is the summary of the landscape and lighting testimony.
I'll pause there for a moment before we move to the planning testimony. We did receive a letter from Mr. Barry dated March, I don't think that's the right, dated the 22nd, I'm sorry, April 22nd of 2021. And in items 9, 10, and 11, we were asked to provide, this specific testimony about tree plantings and the light pole design and LED lamps. I believe that your testimony has fulfilled that requirement, but Mr. Barry, if there's anything else on those topics, we had questions before we moved on, I would pause there.
No, I'm fine with what was testified. Thank you.
If I could ask one question of Raymond here.
Sure.
The lights, when are they going to be turned off at night, or are they going to be only going to be used when the Epic Church is going to be in session, so to say, or whatever?
Mr. Chairman, I don't actually have that answer. I believe they might operate 24/7, but it's possible they could potentially be put on timers so that they go off when the church is not in operation.
And since we are not familiar with the church's operations, I would say that however the lights are operating today, as far as timing, is likely how they would continue. We are assisting them with replacing any lights that we're removing or changing as part of this plan, but we are not attempting to alter the church's operations.
No, that's fine. I was just curious.
Okay, so I would ask that you put on your planner's hat now.
Will do.
And as part of this site, because the church, when it was constructed, required a D1 use variance, we are here this evening, in addition to site plan approval, seeking that modification to that D1 use variance related to this new construction that's proposed. We also are seeking the 4 waivers that have been described so far. So if you could please go through your planning testimony and some of the observations you've made and documents you've reviewed to come up with your opinion concerning those, the requested relief.
Yes, thank you. I will skip some of the technical stuff. Dan Bush introduced a lot of the information relative to the lot area and the size and the lot numbers and whatnot. But just to reiterate, the site is contained in the SED2 zone and also the redevelopment area, the waterfront redevelopment area. However, the SED2 zone requirements that go back to the original approval are in effect for this amended application. And as indicated earlier, the church is not a permitted use in the zone and was granted a use variance in 1996, and we're here to request a modification to that use variance for the reorganization of the parking and the circulation on the site. So I did review the ordinance relative to those standards, and I also reviewed the master plan relative to this particular site and the use. The Epic Church, as I indicated, is contained within the RAW waterfront redevelopment area. This area, as you've heard from our client witness, is a major part of the borough's future economic and community development objectives, as outlined in both the redevelopment plan and the borough's master plan. And as such, implementation of the waterfront redevelopment plan and the roadway infrastructure to support that plan is consistent with the overall community development goals that the borough has established. And this application that the Epic Church has submitted provides the mechanism to allow for the future Riverton Boulevard to be developed as planned through the dedication of the needed right-of-way along the church frontage. So that's what's contained within the redevelopment plan and the master plan related to this particular issue. So with respect to the bulk requirements for the SED2 zone that were in effect at the time the church got approval, there are 2 variances that we're asking for. Obviously the use variance because the church is not permitted in the zone, and the number of loading spaces where 7 is required and 2 are provided. That's a condition that was approved under the original church approval back in 1996. And then we have design exceptions, and Dan described some of them earlier. I'll just reiterate them quickly. We have the light intensity at the property line that I described. A 1/2 foot candle maximum is permitted where we have 1.3 in a couple of very small places. The hairpin striping is required where we're proposing single striping to match the existing on site. In both the north and the south parking lot expansions, we have parking in the front yard. And the parking setback to the property line is within 5 feet. As indicated on the south side, we're at 3.2 feet for the existing as well as the proposed expansion of the southern parking lot. And then the drive aisles, sidewalks, and the street sidewalks were indicated by Dan earlier that we are providing the sidewalks in the appropriate locations within the expanded parking lots and within the site to allow for more than adequate connection and connectivity to the church from the Main Street extension at both the north and the south ends and along future Peter Boulevard, Fisher Boulevard, and Riverton Boulevard. So with respect to the variance and the design waiver justifications, as you've heard in other cases, all the use variances require that we show positive and negative criteria. That falls into 3 different categories: inherently beneficial uses. The property owner would suffer undue hardship if compelled to use the property as zoned, and where the use would serve the general welfare because the site is particularly suited for the use. So in this case, we believe all 3 apply. The church, as you've heard before, is an inherently beneficial use. And it would be unreasonable to consider that the church be replaced by a permitted use, since the church received approval a long time ago and has facilitated itself into the site for a long time. So that's a hardship by saying the church should not be able to expand just because the use is not permitted on the site. And because it's been at the location since 1996, it has assimilated itself to the area, and the suitability criteria is established. Now, also in very broad terms, if the criteria, the positive criteria can be satisfied if the application satisfies a purpose of zoning or one of the specific goals and objectives in the master plan. And as you heard earlier, that this project is providing the mechanism to allow for Riverton Boulevard to be developed as planned, that allows for the overall grander redevelopment area to move forward. So that's an exceptional benefit to the community by providing this right of way in that area. Now, with respect to the bulk variances, we're proposing them as both C1 and C2 variances. The C1
If I
variance
could
is,
pause,
yes,
pause right there, just
Yes.
for one moment. So when we made the application, initially, we were considering the lot area reduction as potentially needing a C variance. But it was pointed out to us by the board's planner that the SED2 requirements at the time of the 1996 approval, which are still in effect today, actually had a lot area requirement, which we still comply with. Is that your understanding?
yes, that is correct. The lot area requirement under the previous ordinance that controls this application is 80,000 square foot requirement, and we're 13.6 acres, so we're well over the minimum required.
And then there were two other areas where we at first thought we might need bulk variances. One had to do with height. And is it your understanding that when we apply the SED2 criteria from the prior 1996 time period, that the application actually does comply with the height requirement?
That too is correct. The prior ordinance that controls this application allowed for 80-foot building height. The current building height is approximately 50 feet, so we comply with that standard. So that variance is not required.
And then the only other bulk variance rather than waiver that arguably might be needed was for loading, which was the previously granted
Yes.
variance for having 2 loading spaces where 7 were required. Are we doing anything with this proposal to change or modify the number of?
We are not. The operation of the church is still the same. It's not being affected by the parking lot expansions. And the 2 loading spaces that exist are sufficient for the church operation. So the 7 spaces per ordinance are not required.
Okay, so I'd propose then that although we initially applied if needed for at this time, required is the D1 variance and the proposed waivers. If we apply the SED2 ordinance that was in effect in the 1990s.
Correct.
Excellent. I'm sorry. Please continue then.
That's all right. You were cutting out a little bit there, so I think I heard most of it. So as I indicated earlier, the
Okay,
positive
sorry about
criteria-
that.
Well, Mr. Leota, just because I know Jennifer did cut out a little bit. So just to make clear on the record, the D1 variance you still need. As a result of the application of the pre-1999 SED2 standards, you no longer need a variance for minimum lot area. You no longer need a variance for the maximum building height. You're in compliance. And also the loading areas remain as previously approved, so you don't need variance relief for that, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Thank
And,
you.
yes. And you heard my testimony relative to the positive criteria. We cover all 3 of those those bases. So that is established in for the use. And with respect to the waivers, I described the lighting intensity is only in a few places along that southern property line, and we will comply within 10 feet. We are using house side shields in that location, and the property that's to the west of us is going to be developed as a commercial property and will not be affected by any minimal light intrusion across the property line. Dan described the hairpin striping requirement, and the current site has single line striping, and for consistency and design purposes, we're proposing the same single line striping. For the parking in the front yard, we're mimicking the setback of the existing condition, which would produce a consistent design and an aesthetic appeal to the site. So we are consistent with current existing conditions. And then due to the Riverton Boulevard right-of-way dedication at the north end, we're losing 34 parking spaces, and we're replacing those spaces in the north parking lot to satisfy the operational demand of the church. So overall, we increased the parking on the site by four parking spaces. And as I indicated, the drive aisle sidewalks and the street sidewalks are more than sufficient to deal with the operational demand of the church, as well as getting pedestrians on the public streets past the site and into the site safely. So I believe that those positive criteria aspects are satisfied for the bulk variances. On the negative criteria side, is there any substantial detriment to the public good? So that's essentially the neighborhood. So the site is currently not adjacent to any other future development, but as you've seen, when Riverton develops, the church will be surrounded essentially on all three sides by Riverton and the streets leading into Riverton, and the church will have no impact on Riverton. And the church parking lot renovations will coordinate with the future roadway system on Riverton Boulevard and Peter Fisher Boulevard, thereby providing much more efficient and safe pedestrian and vehicular access to the site. And the access for emergency service vehicles is also increased by this proposed plan. And in terms of the substantial impairment to the zone plan, the church operation, as I indicated, is not changing and is consistent with the original 1996 approval. The church has assimilated itself into the neighborhood already, so there is no impairment to the zone plan or the zoning ordinance by the continuation of the church operation. The renovated parking lots provide for continued operation of the church demand and complies with the ordinance requirements. And in our opinion, the waivers are justified under the facts and the physical circumstances of the property when we consider the intent and purpose of the zone and what's happening around us. So in conclusion, I believe that the purposes of zoning have been satisfied. There's no substantial detriment to the public good, and that there's no substantial impairment to the zone plan and the zoning ordinance for this particular area.
Thank you very much. Those were the only questions that I had for my witnesses.
All right, thank you. John, have you been satisfied with everything that you had looked at on this?
Yes, my report was addressed by the testimony, and as was testified to, some of the variances that were originally identified are no longer necessary or were previously approved. So I have no comments or questions about the planning testimony.
All right, thanks. And I'd ask Jay the same question. Do you have any issues at all?
No, Mr. Chairman, we did provide a technical review. The applicant's engineer did submit revised plans and reports. He addressed the majority of the items. The ones that remained were in our report this evening. They were discussed. They indicated they will submit revised documents to address those. And with regard to the waiver, we don't have any issues with the waivers that are proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members at all? None? Make a motion, to open up to the public? Joan, do you see anybody at all, or?
Let me just check. No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Make a motion to close. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. This plan looks like it's really going to improve the flow down there for the whole Riverton project, and it looks like it was done pretty well. I just asked the board, what's your pleasure on this?
I'll make a motion, we approve it as read.
Is there a second?
Second.
Joan, roll call?
Mr. Henry,
Yes?
Mr. Savili,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan,
John?
John,
Yes.
Mr. Emma,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito,
Yes.
okay.
Great, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We appreciate your time this evening.
All right, thank you. All right, going on to, I guess, the minutes of the meeting from last meeting. Did everybody have a chance to look at them? Make a motion to accept? That was you, Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oh, all right, I don't see anything else. Carl, is there anything else that we need to discuss at this time, or John or Jay have anything that we need to talk about?
We have to adopt
Resolution.
resolutions, Chairman.
Okay,
The first resolution we have is for COPA, that was application 21-03, that was for an above-ground pool. I prepared and submitted the resolution with the usual conditions and the details of the application. If there's no questions or requests for revisions, we can adopt the resolution.
okay. Someone make a motion?
Motion.
It's approved as written.
Joan, roll call?
Everybody might want to turn their microphones just for the remainder of the night, and we'll get through quicker.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mr. Savili,
Yes.
Mr. Emma,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
Yes.
Thank you. The next resolution was the McGaw application, application 21-02, that was for a detached garage. And same thing, it includes the normal conditions, everything discussed at the meeting. If there's no questions or changes, we can adopt that resolution, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is someone make a motion?
I move it's approved as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Joan, roll call?
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mr. Savili,
Yes.
Mr. Emma,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
Yes.
Chairman, we have one more resolution, but actually before I forget, Joan, let's remember next month to do the resolutions at the beginning of the meeting after we take roll call, because Rich Brigliadoro will need to be there for the adoption of that resolution that he was on tonight, so that way he can do that and get off the
Okay.
line quickly and go back to his normal life.
Rich, I want to thank you for filling in tonight.
Chairman, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks again, Rich. Did a great job.
Appreciate it.
The last resolution we have is the Sayreville Shopping Center, the Dunkin' Donuts application. Again, that was a little more meaty, but again, have all the issues and conditions in there that the board discussed and the conditions the applicant agreed upon. So unless there's any questions or requested revisions, we can adopt that resolution.
Any questions or a motion?
I move it's approved as written.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Joan, roll call?
Who seconded that?
Civilli.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski,
Yes.
Mr. Savili,
Yes.
Mr. Emma,
Yes.
Mr. Esposito.
Yes.
Carl,
Those
no
are
more?
all the resolutions.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions at all? Carl, let me ask, anything new on the temple, or is that just going by the wayside, or?
Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything on that. Jay, have you heard anything? I know it's just sitting.
I have not. Nothing.
Okay.
I think the rumor we heard was that they had some big businessman in India who was supposed to fund all this who did not come through with the money, so it's sitting there.
And their membership's way down. They all went to Monroe.
Yeah, they built that huge one in Monroe.
Because the police used to work there all the time. We don't even work it because they don't even fill the parking lot anymore.
Wow, interesting.
Okay.
Is there people going to expire?
Yes, we have an ordinance that says if you don't, build the building or use the use within 2 years of the approval, that it lapses. So it's been over 2 years. I wouldn't want to try to enforce that in court because it's an Indian temple and under the RLUIPA law, which is very favorable to those institutions. But, I think the chances of them trying to build it at this point are pretty slim. And if they did, it would be scaled down and they'd probably and then it'd have to come back for a new application anyway.
Right. Okay.
Carl, I got a quick question about that.
Sure.
So, is there an expiration date on that at all?
I don't have the resolution in front of me, Phil, but again, we have an ordinance that says, and I include it in the boilerplate language of our resolutions that says, if you get a bulk variance for a swimming pool, you got to build a swimming pool within 2 years. If you get a use variance, you have to start commencing that use within 2 years of the date of the approval. And that's the night we adopt the written resolution. So that's 2 years have long since passed for the temple. I don't know the exact date, but it's definitely been more than 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's not every town. There's case law on that that's allowable to have an ordinance that says that, and Saraville does have that ordinance.
Okay. All right. Anything else at all? Make a motion for adjournment?
Second.
Okay, we'll see you next week. Again, Rich, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. Rich.
Okay, take care.
Take care, everybody.
Good night,
Be well.
everybody.
Night, everybody.
Good job. Good job, Bill.
Take care. Thanks.
Okay,
All right, thanks, John.
okay.